What's going on, guys? In this video we're going to talk about the unedited version of the original Star Wars being re-released. The whole issue with the unedited version, the basically unfinished version of Star Wars, and in the special editions, is that, you know, it was pretty much an unfinished project that George Lucas, released, and people got, people basically fell in love with that version of Star Wars. But in George Lucas's mind, it hadn't been fully, developed. He stated before that he originally intended on the original trilogy to look more like how the prequels came out. It's understandable that he would want to make special editions because it had a lot more CGI elements that he wanted to, use and incorporate in the film to tell the story that he wanted to tell. But they were unable to do exactly what they wanted to at the time due to, a lack of the technology to do it.
What happens when you, especially when you're making a science fiction film, but almost any film, you're working with limited resources, and you're constantly sort of bumping up against the technology that you have. Cinema is an extremely technological medium. So you're defined by those two barriers. One is resources, one is technology. And Star Wars especially bumped up against those. So I was never really able to tell the story that I wanted to tell. I had to self-censor the story down to something I knew could be done given the technology I had available. And I would push it occasionally. I'd develop a way of panning in outer space. I would develop a way of creating a 2.5 foot high character that could act. Really, so at that point, really challenges. And especially with the first film, I had very limited resources. I mean, the budget was $9,999,000. And for a film of that scope, it was, almost an impossible exercise. I was used to it. I mean, the other movies I'd made had all been under $1 million. So I could sort of deal with that sort of thing. But at the same time, I was frustrated. And I got the film finished somehow. But it wasn't finished to the level that I'd want it to be finished. And there's a saying that films I guess there's a saying among directors that a film is never finished, it's just abandoned. And for other directors, it's the film is never finished, they just finally take it away from you at some point. But no matter how the story goes, the director is usually left frustrated and not feeling that he's been able to complete his vision, or it's been altered one way or another. And so later on I had the opportunity when we were thinking about reissuing the films for the 20th anniversary of Star Wars, of fixing them up. And I said, well, this is a great chance for me to experiment with a new technology and see if I can do the prequels, and at the same time fix a lot of things that I was really frustrated with the first time around with Star Wars that I couldn't complete properly because I either didn't have enough time, money, or technology to do it with. And so that was a great experience for me. So the final version, now the DVD version of the films, when they finally get out there, will have all of the nuances that I've been looking for when I first did the films.
So it's really cool to be able to see this unedited version, basically this unfinished version of Star Wars. I have never seen it. I'd like to see it, but I'm wanting to share these thoughts because I think George said with that version of the film, it was like 25 to 30% of what he actually wanted to accomplish. So there's all this extra stuff that didn't get put into the movie that he wanted to put in there. So that version is not really the final version that he had in his mind that he wanted to show people. And so that's where the entire controversy came from, with Star Wars fans getting mad about the fact that he changed things or added certain elements and whatnot. But there's a bigger point to all of this rather than just like, oh, it shouldn't have been this way. It should have gone this way. He should have done this. He should have done that. And I think he even makes the point and uses an analogy about painting a house. I think he says like he wanted to paint it green or white, one of the two, but someone else would come and say, you know, I think you should have painted it white. His response to them is that he didn't care what they thought the color of the house should have been because it was his house to paint, you know? It's his story to tell. And I agree with this because, you know, I'm a creator myself. The story is never fully 100% there. There's always going to be some elements in the storytelling and just in the entire film itself of, you know, weak points, maybe better things could have been better in certain things, but that is a manifestation of the vision, the original vision not being able to fully get fleshed out. You know, sometimes you go back and make changes on projects or songs or something like that to make them better. And, you know, like sometimes musicians remaster their music or, you know, films get remastered all the time. So, and it's not a bad thing because, you know, you're getting a better product. So anyways, you know, when it comes to all of this stuff, you know, George Lucas and Star Wars and Disney owning Star Wars, buying it from them, like George Lucas was ultimately trying to give people the more accurate version of what Star Wars was in his head. And people were just too, you know, married to the original version because that's how they experienced it. And so it's deeply meaningful to them, which I understand. And so, but there's really nothing malicious of any sort from George about what he did when it came to making, you know, updates to the Star Wars films. Like, he had every right to do it because he was the one that created it. And regardless of what fans think, you know, the person making the thing should be able to say what it should be and what it shouldn't be, ultimately, because they're the one that made it. I have an example of something that I just created, and I actually did 2 versions of it, and there's subtle changes.
Even in the galaxy's darkest moments, hope endures. Because the Force flows through those who trust in the light.
Basically, I would prefer you to view the second one because I think that's a better representation of what I set out to create.
Even in the galaxy's darkest moments, hope endures. Because the Force flows through those who trust in the light.
Original trilogy fans sometimes seem to feel like they were betrayed or robbed because of all this, but they didn't even really get what they thought they got, which is what George was trying to, what he did with the special editions, which is really interesting. So, but this is the same thing with the prequel trilogy and the sequel trilogy and all that. It's like the same pattern. Really what it is that, you know, like with the prequel fans, they had in their mind after George made all the movies how the rest of Star Wars would eventually go. Like, if George were to continue to make, you know, movies, which were, if he would have made his sequels, then, you know, we all had in our minds how it should have went, according to like books and games and stuff. But, you know, it was never really meant to go that way. It seems like kind of like just stopped making movies. So then, you know, like that was kind of like the end of the progression of that story. But Disney bought it and they told the story that they told with the sequel trilogy. And in the same sense that the original trilogy people were basically mad about George making the special editions, it's the same thing with them. They are upset that they didn't get the story that the games and all the other media around Star Wars was giving them. So they had it in their minds, and myself included. I expected the story to go one way, and it didn't go that way, and I just was like, oh, okay. Not that I liked or agreed with everything that they did, but that's all there is to it, really. My opinion doesn't matter, should not matter to somebody else. It literally has no effect on them. Saying all this to say that whoever is the one telling the story, writing the story, has the right to tell the story or paint the picture however they want to tell it. And just because the story doesn't go according to how I thought it should have gone doesn't mean anything other than I just kind of had expectations about something that just didn't end up panning out the way I thought it should have gone. It's important not to get too attached to our own point of view, because we don't always know the full story as to why someone's telling the story that they're telling or acting the way they're acting or whatever. Also, another point is just that things ultimately change. I believe that's because, a story is never fully written. There's still aspects, there's always going to be things about filmmaking and storytelling that you aren't actually able to put into the film because it just either for reasons like money, budgeting, or time, and all sorts of different factors that we just can't really consider. So when it comes to the way Star Wars is being made today, we can have our perspective about it, but we should be open to letting things unfold and reserving our judgment before we criticize something just because it doesn't go according to how we think that it should go in our head canon, because there's a lot of extra things that we may be just missing because we're too busy criticizing something we think is not good. But since things change, like, this is not how Star Wars is going to stay, At some point, there will be more change from what Star Wars is now. So prepare yourself for when that change comes. So I guess my final thought on everything is that, what do you prefer? Do you prefer the story told by the storyteller, or do you prefer to look at a story or listen to a story, only view it through how you think it should have gone? Ultimately, it's not proving how wrong someone else is in the way that they view something, but it's about how we can accept things that are not in line with how we think that they should be. Anyways, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, share it with a friend, subscribe to the channel for more Star Wars content like this, and may the Force be with you.